Hi, buddies.
There are a lot of stars in the night sky and can be confusing to deal with them all. So early astronomers helped us out by grouping these stars into neat little shapes known as constellations. And each constellation has its own name and its own mythology, and this makes it a lot easier to work with stars. Because now for any star, just from its name, we can learn a lot about it. For example, let's look at this star here, Alpha Centauri. Now there are two pieces to its name, Alpha and Centauri. Let's look at the second half first. So Centauri, meaning from the constellation Centaurus. Quite simple. Similarly, if you had a star from the constellation Cygnus, it would be Cygni. Now, the primary part is Alpha, the first letter in the Greek alphabet, because, as you can see, this is the brightest star in the constellation. Similarly, the second brightest star would be Beta Centauri, and the third, Gamma Centauri, Delta Centauri, and so on. And this makes it significantly easier for us because now we can learn a lot about a star, such as its location and its magnitude, just from its name.
So, constellations are groupings of stars, but sometimes we care about a piece of that constellation, known as an asterism. So, the asterism is a subgroup of the larger constellation, the most famous example being the asterism the Big Dipper within the larger constellation Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. Officially, there are 88 constellations, as recognized by the International Astronomical Union. However, civilizations 2,000 years ago didn't have some central authority telling them what the constellations are. They had to figure it out for themselves. And the really interesting thing about the Big Dipper is that no matter what civilization we're talking about, people on opposite sides of the globe, having never contacted one another, came up with the same grouping of stars. As we can see in this image here, it's sort of like a heat map of all the different constellations, where each color corresponds to a culture. And as you can see, most cultures basically saw the same grouping of stars, the same Big Dipper. Now, what they interpreted this grouping to represent varied from culture to culture. Some imagined an animal, such as an elk or a caribou, while others imagined a Big Dipper or a chariot. However, I should note that this isn't true for all constellations. Some of them definitely had very different groupings among cultures. For example, Canis Major. While we saw this shape, others saw a fat polygon, or a line, or just simply a dot. The most famous of constellations is the Zodiac. But what is the Zodiac? To understand, consider the Earth. We can imagine the night skies wrapping around the Earth, creating a sort of celestial sphere that surrounds us. And of course, the Earth is tilted, and let's put it in context. The Earth lies in the solar system, and there is a plane to this solar system known as the ecliptic that everything lies on. And as we can see, the ecliptic intersects the celestial sphere, which means some of the constellations lie on the ecliptic. This allows those constellations to get covered up by the sun, as we see here. So all the zodiac is constellations that lie on the ecliptic, and therefore, in some special time of year, get covered up by the sun. The funny thing is, that's not even true! Scorpio barely lies on the ecliptic, prompting some people to add Ophiuchus as the 13th zodiac in its place. Furthermore, a phenomenon called precession causes Earth to shift in its orbit around the sun over the years. As a result, the position of the sun changes over time. As a result, it doesn't cover the same constellations it used to. In fact, by now, all of the zodiac has shifted by a month. So when astrologers tell you your horoscope, they're not even basing it on the current position of the stars. They're basing it on when someone said 2 millennia ago. It's time to play Guess That Constellation. The rules are simple. I show you a constellation, you guess what it is. And don't worry, this one doesn't have too many stars. Ready? Go. Put your guess in the comment section below. You've done it? Great. If you thought the answer was Canis Minor, the small dog, well, you would be absolutely wrong. The correct answer was the other constellation that consists of only 2 stars and is oddly dog-themed, Canis Venatici. And by looking at the background stars, you can tell that these are in fact 2 different constellations in 2 different regions of the sky. The purpose of this game was to illustrate the fact that constellations exist in context. The surroundings also matter, and we can learn a lot about a constellation based on its location, not just relative to other stars, but relative to other constellations. Here we have 3 separate constellations, Puppis, Vela, and Carina, all part of the same boat, the Argo from Greek mythology. In general, constellations of similar mythologies exist adjacent to one another in the sky. We can also learn a lot about constellations' location based solely on its name. For example, the earliest astronomers were the Greeks and Babylonians in the Northern Hemisphere, and they named many of their constellations after mythology. For example, Orion the Hunter, or Buddhist the Herdsman. And so if you see a constellation named after mythology, it's probably in the Northern Hemisphere, because that's what these astronomers saw. Later on, navigation became better, and so we have the modern astronomers of the 16th and 17th centuries that started exploring and naming constellations in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, these guys weren't as creative as their predecessors, so they named it after a bunch of animals, giving us constellations like chameleon and toucan. So if you see an animal name, it's likely in the Southern Hemisphere. And finally, we have these random constellations scattered throughout of very specific inanimate objects, and these were all named by the same dude, Lacaille. And from it, we get wonderful examples such as Norma, the carpenter's box, or every astronomer's favorite, a literal telescope. And finally, here are some unique stars that are just good to know. Typically, they're the brightest star in their constellation. First off, we have Polaris, the North Star. It's pretty bright, and it is the closest star to the North Celestial Pole, making it really great for navigation. If you can find this star, then you know how to head north. And finding it is actually pretty nice because we have companion stars, Merak and Dubhe from the Big Dipper. You just connect the line and boom, you found it, as you can see in this picture here. Next up, we've got the Summer Triangle, which is what it sounds like. 3 really bright stars that are prominent during the summer. Those stars are Vega, Altair, and Deneb. Vega we'll talk about in a future lesson because it serves as a good reference star when we start talking about brightness, but there's the triangle. Then we have Proxima Centauri, also known as Alpha Centauri, which we actually talked about in the beginning of this lesson. The reason it's so cool is because it is physically the closest star to our solar system. And lastly, we have Sirius, which is known for being the brightest star in the night sky. And that's everything you need to know about constellations. If you have any questions or recommendations for future topics, leave them in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when I release future videos. The websites I used in this video were Stellarium Web and Figures in the Sky. Both of these I think are really wonderful sources if you would like to explore constellations further. In addition, I've linked a YouTube channel, Learn the Sky, which discusses each constellation in detail. Finally, if you would like to be updated on STEM competitions and have access to a ton of other STEM resources, please join our Discord community, Buds. And with that, I'll see you next week. Bye-bye!